Hello, this is Sarah, and I'm going to be describing my new UI. This is just for my own documentation, but I figured I would share it to see if anybody else would find it useful. So some background, I was using Perl since 2007, and that would be about 16 years today. So this is 2023, it would be a change. So to start with, I'm using Elvui for my party frames. I mostly play Mythic Plus. For this, I'm not using it for chat, I'm only using it for party frames. Everything else, I'm just going to describe it for how I use it. So to start with, I created my own profile and posted the link on Wago. So to go ahead and import the profile, you'll just go ahead and set up your Elvui if you first set it up for the first time. So right here, you'll just hit escape and click on Elvui. And you'll go to profiles and import profile. So we can go to our Wago URL. Right here, you just copy import string. This is subject to change at any time as I continue to improve this UI, but this is where it is for the most part. And you'll just copy and paste it here and press import now and close. So I've already set it up, so we don't need to do that for now. But to go ahead and use the profile, you're going to click on profiles here and just select the profile you will use here. So mine is just called Resto Druid. Okay, so once you've already imported your profile, it should look somewhat like this. Hopefully it has not changed that much since I have first posted this Pastebin, so yeah, but this can be subject to change over time. So generally this is where it looks like. So to configure the party frames, you'll go ahead and click escape again, Elvui, and you'll click on nameplates, unit frames right here, and make sure this part is enabled. Usually as part of the first time setup, you would enable unit frames for this section here. So to start with, we'll start with a party frames configuration. So as you can see, this is where you would normally select it. So you go under unit frames, group units, and then party, and from here you can configure it. So general is for everything that covers everything. Aura indicator is mainly for like, let's see, these are the display frames to test it. You can see aura frames are for usually like your buffs and everything. We'll get into configuring auras later, but I just want to give you an overview of how this works. The buffs would be like your defensive cooldowns. I don't really want to enable this here because I use a separate add-on called Big Debuffs. And to describe what that is, it literally works out of the box for big debuffs that are pretty important when you want to track, you know, tank cooldowns or maybe some DPS offensive buffs. But that's a separate add-on. So yeah, cast bar is literally seeing people's cast bars. So in the old X Perl or Z Perl configuration, by default it would show, but sometimes that might be a little too distracting. So what that is to just like show little cast bars within the party frame itself. Don't really want to show that for mine, so I usually have it disabled, but that's where it is if you need to configure it. The combat icon is if you're in combat with an enemy, it would show here. So usually that little indicator icon with two swords that would show that you're in combat. So just one thing to note is if you are in combat, you will not be able to configure Elvui. So this is one of those things where I think I may be incorrect in this, but I have to like constantly go in combat to configure it. So here's like one thing. You can see my combat icon is right here on the very top. I'll just go ahead and DPS this down to get rid of my combat status so I can continue editing. So you can see this big debuff aura here is tracked by a separate add-on completely called Big Debuffs again. But yeah. So continuing on with Elvui, this is where it is. Debuffs, or if you want to track debuffs within your party frames, which I have it enabled here. But that's just kind of like the most important stuff. Target market icon is if you want to put skull, like all these things, and obviously I'm there. That shows for the party. That's where you would edit that. target group. This is if you want to configure targets. In Xperl, the default setup was you showed it. I did some experimentation. I found out that I did not like it because it was a little too distracting. So you can turn it off there. And that's pretty much... Oh, and here's the ready check. The ready check icon is when you are in a party with someone else and you would see like a ready check with the little check mark here, or X. Resurrect, of course, like shows all the resurrect. This is all like mostly little things that you can configure for yourself, but once you've imported my profile, you'll see how I have configured it the way I like it. But that's pretty much where you would configure these areas if you would like to test it. So this is if you would like to test it and then turn off or not testing. Okay, so now moving on with how to move these little party frames and individual areas here. So to move the areas, these little panels or so, you go to File, Escape, and you'll go to Toggle Anchors. I know it seems like a lot of stuff here, but if you'd like to see all of the things that you can move with LFG, you can see it here. So you would check this area for configuration mode for like general or party to like filter out which areas you'd like to move, and then obviously you could see you can move it like this. Once you're done and happy with what you like to configure, you can go ahead and click on lock. And another thing too is you can configure this while editing your own LFG configuration. So sometimes I like to edit this at the same time, like what you can actually see within this party frame while moving it. So you just keep this toggle anchors option open, press escape, LFG. You can see that I can configure this while I'm moving it at the same time. So just the same things I previously discussed, but you can continue to move it as you want to. Obviously I'm in combat, so there goes my configuration panel. I'll just go ahead and shadow meld because I'm a night elf, see if that works. Get me out of combat. There we go. Okay, so continuing on. So to kind of go back over auras, so this particular video is mainly focusing on the fact that I am a Resto Druid and I would like to track my Resto Druid buffs and auras. So these are my Rejuve, Regrowth, and Life Bloom spells. And then here's Wild Growth. It'll show because that's a raid specific buff or affects the whole party. You can see I like to see Scenario and Ward tracked. And then Tranquility on the bottom left. And you can see the little stacks here. So these individual icons are called auras that have to be configured. Usually out of the box with LFG it would have it already set, but sometimes you want to move these individual buffs for your own liking. So another thing too here is Insect Swarm, and I want to see my Flourish. Right here it shows us a big debuff, or a big buff, because it's also tracked in big buffs, debuffs. So that's how I have mine set up. So to configure that, you'll go to Unit Frames, Group Units, Party. And then you'll go to Aura Indicator. This is where you would configure those individual aura buffs. You'll click on Configure Auras. I pretty much imported this from a profile that somebody else already had. So for mine, I just went ahead and just added more to it. One thing to note is as there are new content releases or any changes that Blizzard does with patch releases, these IDs can be subject to change. So some of these are already existing, so I have a separate... So one thing to note is when you import a profile in LFG, this does not include the configurable auras here, so you'll have to actually import this profile as a separate one. So to start with, we're going to go to LFG. We're going to go to my paste bin. It looks like on Wago it does not allow us to configure auras that are within LFG. Correct me if I'm incorrect. But to go ahead and start with, I have it in a paste bin link, which you can pull it here. You'll go ahead and copy this information and you'll go to Profiles, Import Profile. You'll see that it's Aura Filters, Import Now. Click on Close. And then from here, to find it, you'll just go to Unit Frames, Aura Indicator, Configure Auras. So again, it's already in here, but if you're new and starting off from scratch, this is where you would configure it. So to see all the stuff that already exists, you'll just go to select spell, like see the stuff here that already exists. So for mine is Resto Druid centric. You'll see there are multiple entries for some of these because some of the IDs may be a little different, but it's good to just have multiple and you can always add more to it. So if you would like to add a new spell ID because for some reason it's not working, if there's a new patch that came out, you can always add the spell ID here by number. If you're not sure how to find the spell ID, you can either find it on Wowhead or best practice. You might be able to find it as a tooltip. Like here you can see the ID as a tooltip for determining what the ID currently is. You'll see that on Wowhead that there are multiple IDs for every spell, so you want to make sure you can see the one that is corresponding to the one that you currently have. So you can pull it up in your spellbook, you can see all the individual IDs. Okay, so from there, for example, Tranquility is already 740, press OK. It will add here. It will look it up and then add there. For me, I already currently have it added. So from here, to test it, you can go to select the ID or the spell here that you found. And then show and not active. This is just so you can test it while it's obviously not being channeled because some of these abilities have cooldowns. So to move it around, you just select an anchor point. So in this case, it's going to be an anchor point to the bottom left of my party frame. So this is where it looks like. Right now I currently have it set to 0 and 0 because obviously it's on the very bottom left of the corner of the screen. You can obviously move it around here and watch it move. That's X to go left and right, and Y to go up and down. So in this case I have it set to 0 and 0 to keep it simple, mainly because I like the position where it's currently at. So I'll set this to 0. And the display text is to show the stacks. So when you want to test it for reals, you want to uncheck this box to make sure it disappears because obviously you don't have it active. This is just a test to see where you are placing your icons. So in this case, Tranquility has stacks, so when I'm casting it, you'll see it slowly moving up in stack numbers. So that's what that show text is. Alright, so just kind of showing you too, you just repeat the process for if you want to change the positioning of the aura icons that you like to track. So here are my 3. The 3 that I like to see with my Resto Druid, and that's how my auras are set. So sometimes you want to move this aura spacing. It looks like we can't really do configuration of aura spacing, so it has to be manually configured by position. So in this case, let's take a look at rejuvenation and then regrowth. So to test it again, we're just going to show when not active. Sometimes if it doesn't show, you might have to find the other ID that associates with it. So let's take a look here. So in my case, it is 774. It's not active. It's currently not active right now. So you can do that. Or check that box. Regrowth. Show and not active. Obviously you want to see where it is, the position in. You would go to Life Bloom. Show and not active. So you can see they're all stacked together. You can see how the offset is configured. So 36 it looks like because that's the size of the icon. To change the size of an individual icon, you can actually select it here under size offset. So like you can make it bigger or smaller depending on how you like it. I like it 0 for now. That's what 0 looks like. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck these since I'm done with configuring these. And regrowth. And then rejuvenation. So that describes pretty much in short how to configure party frames, at least the way I have configured it for Elvui. Now moving on for the target frames. So this is my player frame, which shows me here. And this is my target. And I want to see the target of target because then, you know, I'm still used from X-Perl. So I want to see how it's configured similarly to how I had it in X-Perl, just tracking the same ideas or same things I want to see. So for player, this is the player frame. And then this is the target frame and target of target. So to configure those, we'll go to Elvui. We're going to go under unit frames, individual units, because obviously this is an individual unit. And player frame, this is what the player frame is. You enable this. Similarly to how we configured auras and whatnot, it would be around here. So if you like aura bars versus icons, I personally like icons. You can configure it to have bars. So this is what aura bars would look like. But you know, that can, you know, clutter up my screen, so I turn that off. And then from there, that's where you can configure it. So target would be your target literally. So I'm targeting myself. Enable, disable, that's what it would be. And then the target of the target would be right below it. That's how I have it set up. Enable, disable, etc. I don't like to have target of target of target. That's a little too much for me. One thing too, I like to have a focus target. So I'm going to set this guy right here as my focus target. My focus target is actually below. So see, I've unclicked my target, but I still have it as focus. Personally, I like to use focus targets for setting my interrupt target. I like to interrupt a lot as far as Mythic Plus goes, because that's really important. So for focus frame, it would be under individual units again. So unit frames, individual units, focus target. You can enable or disable this. And if you need to see the focus frame's target, you can go to focus target. This would be the configuration here. So I'm going to set myself as focus. I want to see my focus target. So it's right below. That's where I have it configured. It's pretty basic since obviously I don't really track so much when I look at focus target. I usually like to have a focus target if I need to set an interrupt or whatnot. At least when I have my macros set that way. But that would be the area to configure it. So enable, disable to show you that that is where it is. Same thing like party frames, you can configure the auras and buffs right here. So target, it would be under aura bars if you like aura bars. Like right here, that's where the aura bars are. I'm going to disable that because I do not like that. Buffs, obviously I want to see like these are the buffs icons that are above. You can enable or disable that. And you should be able to configure it as bars, I believe. I don't recall where, but that's where I like to keep it. Similar to how we move these panels, you can go to escape, Elvui, toggle anchors. Again, that shows everything, so you want to go ahead and select like solo, for example, and you can see the areas that are for solo, target frame, target frame, target cast bar, etc. So if you want to see the player cast bar, you would configure that together with player, and same thing with the target cast bar. Go to Elvui, unit frames, individual units, since it's obviously not a group unit. And for player, for example, you can select like your cast bar. It would be under cast bar, so right here. If you want to see your target's cast bar, same thing, target, cast bar. It would be right here. Let's target myself. Oh, we're still in the toggle anchor setup, so we want to go here, target myself. See that it's casting, that's what it would be. Okay, so that pretty much describes all of my Elvui section. So that's pretty much what my profile is. Other minor little things too, you can configure it to use the minimap here if you want to use like a square minimap. I want to go ahead and describe the extra optional areas. So that would be under maps. It would be under, oh, so when you configure maps, you may need to do a reload UI for it to update. And so for minimap, one thing I like to track is the LFG queue. So let's go ahead and make a fake custom start group just to have this showing. For me, I use Minimap button bag to organize all my Minimap icons in here. But one thing to note is the LFG icon here that you can configure here. I have to remove it from Minimap button bag, which you can control click and then you can see the little minus sign if you use that add-on. And we'll detach it from the Minimap button bag. One thing to note about this icon is that if you have an add-on called Move Any, which is literally Move Any module from your UI, it may conflict against itself. So you just need to determine if your add-ons may be conflicting against each other when you need to move things across, like move like individual parts across. So Elvui UI in this case looks to be controlling like the scale. You can see the scale is going up or down, X offset, Y offset. Looks like it won't let me move it, so I might have to use my other add-on to move it physically. So you can see it's moving here. So I have to just right click on this and just move it back up. It's kind of weird when you have multiple add-ons fighting over specific parts of your UIs, so that's what it is. That's my add-on called Move Any. It is not part of Elvui UI. Now the other thing to note too that I like to track with Elvui UI is the durability frame. So to configure that, you would go to Elvui UI, toggle anchors. It is right here. Like if you're taking a lot of durability damage on your items, it would be tracked here. So that pretty much covers most of it. You can configure extra things like reputation or XP. You would go under, let's take a look here. Sometimes if you're not sure where to find a specific thing you need to find, like which kind of panel you need to edit, let's go here. Maybe we can find it here. So for this one, I'm tracking reputation, but I'm not sure where to configure it. So it would be under, you search for here, data bars. Let's go to reputation, and it will take you straight to the area that you need to configure it in. So it's under data bars. You can see I'm enabling, disabling it. It's right there. That's where you would configure it. You can change it so that it's XP or whatever you're currently tracking. So XP, reputation, honor. We don't really need threat in here nowadays because, you know, it's retail. I know it sounds funny, but I used to track, I actually use Plater or whatever my nameplates are to track my current threat on a target. So that's a good segue into going into the next part. That's here. So the next part of this is Plater. So I would like to give a background. I was using Tidyplates threat plates, which was TP for config, since 2009, which would be about 14 years. So one of the Mythic Plus nameplates, one of the more common Mythic Plus nameplates that people like to use is called Plater. So I recently just picked it up again. So to use Plater, you can just go to Plater options. And for this one, you can just go ahead and import a profile. So I'm not actually sure where to find it since I'm still new to using this add-on. So let's go to search profile. It should take us there. If not, then we can just go ahead and let's take a look here. Where's our, oh, profiles are right here. So from here, you go to import profile and copy your paste string here. So on Wago, we have an area where we can go ahead and import a Plater profile. So just like you did for Elvui UI, you can go ahead and paste it right here. So for now, I've already done that. I'll just show you how I have mine configured. So you can see right here, that is my target frame. Right now, we're currently not in a dungeon. But for Plater, when a tank has threat, it would show in blue to show that it's appropriately being tanked. You can see my auras right here. We'll just go ahead and attack this. My little auras show right above. And you can see a cast bar. If it does cast something and it is not gray, that means it can be interrupted. So in this case, I can interrupt that, and you briefly could see that I've interrupted it. So one thing to note about my Plater was that I actually added 2 mods to this Plater profile. And one includes dispellable auras, especially with your druid. One thing I liked about Tidyplates threat plates is that it highlighted anything I could dispel. In this case, I wanted to make it obvious to see that I can offensively dispel a buff that the mob has. So from there, that's where I have it modded, and as well as like if I change this target I have to like a square, it changes color. I just wanted to see that it changes color from your normal tank colors if it is being tanked already. So let me get out of combat. You can see I marked it as a square, so it changes the whole entire color based on whatever the target or whatever target icon that is. So that's why I have it like that. I like to see the obvious little signs. So there's really not much to configure from Plater. It pretty much works very well out of the box, but there are some little mini things here and there that you can configure. I would leave it up to, you know, everybody else to kind of figure out how they want to configure Plater. But for this one, you can just go ahead and import the profile I have, and if you like it, then great. If not, then you can go ahead and mess with the individual options. There's really not much to configure, at least the way I like it. So I would say this is pretty much self-explanatory. I like to have it stacking because I want to see my aura buffs whenever I'm DPSing something. I do not like to see friendly nameplates because it would add too much clutter on my screen. So that's pretty much how I have it. So moving on to some specific Weakauras that I like as a Resto Druid. So for one, the general thing that most people should be having right now, if anything that's a 10 key or higher, is you'll need to have the Thundering Affix Weakaura. So for mine, I have it set this way. There is a Wago copy and paste for this for Weakauras. So for this one, I have it set to have it my little circle here. It just shows that if I'm safe and it has been dispelled, it will show as a circle right here and say safe in green. There is a corresponding bar you can enable. I like to enable it so I can see when the next one is. So you can see all, if you go ahead and expand the group parts of this Weakaura, you can mess with it to see what you would like to configure. So out of the box, you can configure custom options. So I like to enable a thundering bar, which is what this is, custom options. And that's pretty much like self-explanatory right out of the box. I like to, you can enable say bubbles, and then I changed mine to say to include a timer. I believe this is on by default, but what this, and also this enable frame glows will actually show on your frame the opposite icon you will need to run to that person to clear your debuff. It's actually really nice because it makes it really obvious on your screen who needs to clear their debuffs, at least to you. This is relevant to you, so whatever opposite icon they have, it will highlight on the screen. Right now I'm not actually in a dungeon, but once you are in a dungeon, it will highlight whatever party frame you have. Okay, so from here, you can actually configure the bar. So if we find the specific item for the bar, we can go ahead and configure it. So you can click on this bar to configure it individually, which I can't remember how to do it, but it's right here. There's individual parts that you can configure for this. Okay, so this is the bar. The timer is the bar. You can actually make it smaller or bigger depending on how you like it, just like how you normally configure your Weakauras. So like here, you can configure it like that. Me, I like to make it, I was doing several audits and I want to go ahead and put it above my party frames. So when my party frames are full of people, so 5 people, it will show above here, since I obviously look in this area quite a bit. For Resto Druid specific Weakauras that I use Growl's Resto Druid stuff. I know out of the box it comes out of all the auras, as well as your cooldowns and utility you can use. That's usually lined up here. I have it only enabled so it only shows the things that I want to track here in my auras. But it's pretty intuitive as far as the Weakaura goes. It's very like comprehensive as what you need to know as Resto Druid. I only picked the stuff that I want to see since I track it other places. Everybody has their own individual preference as to how they want to configure their setup, so that's pretty much where I got my Weakaura that shows my little reminder on my mouse right here. These little highlight icons show that I need to put it on there somewhere. So for example, I just casted Efflorescence and it is off my cursor. 2 stacks of life blooms because I have that spec. This is also reactive in relation to the spec that you currently have configured. So in my case, I have it set for Mythic Plus spec, so I have 2 life blooms in this case, so that's why there's a number 2 above it. So if I cast life bloom on myself, you'll see that the number goes to 1 because I already casted 1 life bloom. Efflorescence again, and Ensnaring Ward, it's gone. So I still have the life bloom icon because obviously there's nobody else to cast it on right here. That's what I like to use about it. So from here, you can also cast, when you're in a dungeon, Insect Swarm will also highlight on your frame, like it will suggest who you should cast it on next. Like little dancing marquee type of animation. It's kind of like a lighter version compared to my Thundering Affix, but it will only activate when you're in a dungeon. So that pretty much wraps up my Resto Druid setup. If there's anything else you'd like to know, or you know, this was mainly for my own self, feel free to let me know and I'll like improve from here. Thank you!